Hello, I'm the Reverend Don Davidson, and I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you this Advent to join me in an exploration of what it is that each of the original gospel writers wanted us to hear about who Jesus Christ is and was. We live in a generation that is quite used to the fact that we hear the Christmas story as none of the gospel writers presented it. We've managed to take 4 stories, force them together into that Christmas pageant we love so much, and in so doing, we miss the opportunity to hear what it is that each of the original writers wanted us to know. You see, we live in a generation consumed with factuality. We want to know when we hear a story, is that literally true? But that was not the approach that the original framers of the gospel took at all. And when we approach the gospels in that way, we run the risk of missing the point entirely. I grew up in a small town in southern Ontario. I was fortunate enough on the farm. We lived right next door to my grandfather and right around the corner from his 2 brothers, my Uncle Ed and my Uncle Charlie. They were very elderly, and they had experienced an incredible amount of the history of southern Ontario. And they were phenomenal storytellers. I used to love to sit and listen to the stories that those 3 men had to share. All of them were quite good at employing the literary device of exaggeration. And if you had asked me as a child, were their stories literal or factual? Even as a child, I would have laughed at you. But if you asked me, are their stories true? Even as an adult, I'd say an unconditional yes. You see, I learned some of the greatest truths of life by listening to the stories woven by those 3 men. And that is the way that the gospel writers approached their story. They were not books of history or literal fact. They were books of theology. And so each writer told their story in a way that drove home the message they wanted us to hear about who Jesus Christ is. So I'd like to invite you to join me for 10 short online live Bible studies looking at 10 aspects of the 4 gospel narratives of the Incarnation, and trying to remove ourselves enough from that Christmas pageant story to hear the very clear messages that each of the gospel writers wanted us to apprehend. I hope that you'll be enjoying a wonderful Advent preparation and that you might be richly blessed by God.